All right, welcome everybody to the Hobby CNC with Dave show. I am really excited about tonight's show. I've got a guy who I ran across his channel. Actually, I think I first kind of sort of met him when he was popped in on my coffee sessions live streams that I used to do in the mornings. But started wanting to check out some information about the Onefinity CNC and stumbled across his channel and have been binge watching ever since. So, without any further ado, please welcome Mr. JR.
Well, hey,
How you
good
doing,
evening.
JR?
Good evening, Dave, and good evening, everybody that took a minute to join us. I'm glad to see everyone, and hopefully you're not as cold as they are in some parts of the country that I'm seeing. So welcome, everyone.
Yeah, it's still pretty kind of cold and wet and miserable around here. So, um, hopefully, hopefully it'll warm up soon.
Yeah,
I'm
sure will.
already sick of this. And I know North Carolina, where you're at, got a little dose of snow, didn't you?
Well, I'm actually down in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh,
So,
South Carolina. Okay.
yep, down in Charleston. But we just they just closed the bridges around here because ice has fallen off the upper structures down onto the roadways. So, hope to get those opened up again soon. So, yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I've got a lot of questions. I made my list today, so
Okay.
none of them are very hard, I don't think. So, but I do have a lot of questions, and we will be taking some questions from our viewers tonight. So, let me kind of, if you have a question for JR, just please put it in the chat, and if you would put a Q in front of it, and that'll make it easy for us to spot it. And we will be taking those here a little later in the show.
Yeah.
But anyway, JR, just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've been, from what I saw in your videos, you've been a woodworker for quite a while.
Yeah. So I started doing woodworking, and it was really DIY level stuff. Really starting about 25 years ago, and have had like everybody, busy 9 to 5 job. So I feel like most of that time I haven't been able to spend as much time doing it as I would like. But about 10 years ago, I decided, when all that was on TV was voting people off the island or talent contests, I said none of that's for me. So I really shifted my free time in the evenings after work and on the weekends into really getting into woodworking. So I would say hard, heavy at it, probably closer to 10 years, with most of my, free time being dedicated to woodworking. And what I really enjoy to do the most really is furniture related stuff, because I feel like that people are going to get a lot of use out of that, and that has been primarily what I've been involved in. And just added a CNC to my tool package. I guess I took delivery of it in January of 21. So it was really neat for me to see what that was going to do, how it could augment my woodworking, and it's been so fun and interesting to learn all the things that I've learned to date. I certainly don't know it all, but it's been a really fun adventure getting into CNC and seeing what it's all about. Yeah.
Okay, now you mentioned you build furniture, and I've seen some of your videos about that. What made you go, oh, I want to add a CNC to my shop? What?
Well, so I can tell you that I found that for certain things, so as I kind of moved through different levels of tolerances, right? So in the first things I would have done would have maybe been built-ins and things really around my house, build out a pantry, with cabinetry like we're all used to, some probably plywood backing and a lot of poplar for bases, and maybe finish it with sapele, countertops and shelves and so forth. And what I found was that maybe, and again, I had never had a hard need for it, but I thought maybe when I get into certain things like very curvy legs or complex legs that I knew I wanted to have multiples of, instead of roughing out one template and using that, I thought, gosh, if you had a tool at your disposal that could, you could spend the time in the design software and make it how you really wanted to make it. And while the machine's doing it, you're nearby doing some other task that further advances the project. I have to say, I have almost found it's like having an assistant in the shop, because while it's doing certain mundane tasks, I can move forward in other things that require, that woodworker to be in front of. So I really just, I guess the short way to answer the question is I just had a feeling that with the type of work I was doing, I would be able to kind of take some of that furniture up to the next level. And really it means putting in maybe some inlays, or in a recent build on some nightstands and dressers, they wanted to have some kind of filigree corners on the drawer fronts, and I would not have been able to do that in the past without a CNC machine. So it's really just added a level of intricacy to some of the furniture that I do.
All right. Now, one question that just popped into my head listening to you talk about, because I know this is your first CNC, and you mentioned it being another helper in it running while you do other things. How long did it take before you stopped watching it?
Realistically 2 months. I just was enamored with what it was able to do, and it's probably the same experience. So I had some 3D printers a couple of years ago, and it was just like watching black magic, come out of a genie bottle, right? So I don't know about everybody else, but I really started with some very simple tasks. And of course, you have to set up your spoil board, and you start thinking about clamps, work holding fixtures, and so forth. So the good news is that there's some room for error with those. But when you're brand new to it, I think a lot of folks sit there and watch it and babysit it. Probably 2 months solid. I just was really so fascinated with what it was capable of doing. That I probably didn't get much else done while I was doing it.
Yeah, I know that's something I keep trying to tell people that they need to get over, is because so many people will hit the cycle start button and then just stand there and watch it, and I'm like, it's supposed to help you.
Yeah.
With production, there's probably something you could be sanding while that thing's running.
That's right. That's right.
But okay, well, 2 months, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Another question I had for you is, I've looked on the Onefinity website, and I noticed they have a page on there where they talk about their lead times to keep people updated on whether their order has shipped and stuff like that. And it looks like there's a pretty good lead time, which I think, to me, that's a good sign, because that means it's a good quality product people are willing to wait for. But How long did you have to wait for yours? Did you get in on the early thing? Because they haven't really been around that long, I don't think.
Yeah, I would not say I was in on the very earliest part of it. And I might get this wrong just a hair one way or the other, but I think that they opened for pre-orders maybe, or did some announcements around the May time frame of 20, and then probably started taking hard orders, I think June-ish, and maybe some of the members here. There are some folks who I speak with somewhat regularly that were literally like order number 50. But I think it was somewhere in the June possibly area where they where it's either that they started shipping them, and they did a neat thing that I would think it would be worth mentioning briefly, because it really struck me, and I didn't know it at the time, but when they were ready to go to production, first off, they sent out 12 or so beta machines to go get it right before they went to production. And when they did go to production with the revisions they found out about in the beta, they only shipped 25 a week or something along those lines. And it wasn't because they didn't have the capacity to do more. It was that they wanted to kind of take a crawl, walk, run approach, and if there were going to be issues that came up that they didn't foresee, they wanted to be able to address it on a smaller batch. And I just thought that was really unique. You usually see companies, once they feel reasonably good about a product, they just hit the gas and go and worry about it later. But these guys have been very thoughtful, I think, in the way that they have approached the quality control of the machine, from the way they rolled up the production to even today. So in preparation for this, frankly, I reached out to Onefinity, and I would want to tell your audience, just because I always, I'm going to speak probably fairly positively on most topics about the Onefinity, and I just want to say up front that, Onefinity and I don't have a relationship, a financial relationship, or I guess, in the YouTube world, partnerships, or however, sponsored, any of that stuff. None of that. Down on my Onefinity t-shirt, I bought this t-shirt even, never mind the machine and everything else that we might talk about today. But I've been just very impressed with the company itself. Not only the design of the machine and all that stuff, but also as I learned, because I wanted to understand a little more about the company, getting ready to meet with you, Dave. And so I just asked for a little information, and that's kind of how I learned about that early production crawl, walk, run decision that they made. And I have to tell you that I was impressed before, but I'm kind of more impressed knowing that now. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I also saw something on their website, and you probably know more about this than I do, but it said something about, and I think it was on that page where they were talking about the lead times and stuff, but they mentioned that they don't just, put the stuff in sub-assemblies and throw it in a box and ship it out. It looks to me like that they test all these machines.
Yeah.
Where they put them together and test them to make sure that, that's part of their quality control. Which
Yeah.
was really, and I can see that, because that would add to the lead time, because it takes time to do that. But
Yeah. So in my discussion with, so his name is Mark, the inventor of the CNC machine that we're talking about tonight, the Onefinity. An aside is that they weren't new to the CNC world. They were the inventors and producers of the Suck-It dust boot, and just got to a place with some success with that Suck-It dust boot. And what they found, I guess, is that as machines were getting changes made to them, they weren't really, as an accessory provider, they weren't really being kept up on the changes that were being made that would have directly affected the fitment of their product. And they said, well, gosh, why aren't we making one? The owner has a background in mechanical engineering, and it just made sense for him to, try this out. But yes, to your point, every one of the machines goes out having been turned on and a test carve done at their facility before they ship the machine. And that the little test piece that that is performed actually ships with the machine. And I know this will sound silly, but whoever it is that's testing it or in that facility, they make a handwritten note and say, hey Dave, this piece was QC tested, and enjoy your machine, or some nice little note like that. And I just think, you don't see too many companies taking that level of attention to QC the machine before it leaves, to your point. And I just think
it's a very nice little personal touch, I think. And I first saw that, you may know the person I'm talking about. His name is Jim something. I can't think of his last name, but his YouTube channel is The Edge of Tech. And I was watching a live stream, and he was doing an unboxing and assembly of the smallest one, the one they call the Machinist.
Yep.
Which I think is 16 by 16 work area, I believe, something like that. And in the box, when he opened it up, he pulled out that sign where they had tested it, and it was signed on the back by whoever did the QC and everything. And I thought, wow, what a really cool personal touch there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, since I already mentioned the smaller one, let's talk about the sizes. I understand there's, I did tried to do a little research, and I did a little digging on their website this morning. And it looks like there is basically 3 sizes, but even one of those sizes, you can get an upgrade to that in the size of the linear rails, I guess.
Yeah.
So they have what they call the Machinist, which is, I think, a 16 by 16 cutting area. And then they have the Woodworker, which I think that's what you started out with, correct?
It is, yeah. And the Woodworker is a 32 1/8 by 32 1/8 working space. And that was the biggest one they had at the time that I ordered. And I'm realizing I didn't answer your question about the lead time, so don't let me wander, because I'll turn this into a 4-hour deal. So I think that I ordered, and honestly I meant to look today and I forgot. I ordered either at the end of September or sometime in October, and I had my machine in January of 21, and that was during the time when they were still, I think, being really judicious about not cranking them out as fast as they could, but really focusing on the quality. So I couldn't tell you what their current lead time is, but I think it's either 8 or 12 weeks or something on that line. And
I got you covered there, JR, because I even printed this out so I would have, because this is from now it says they last updated this page on December 23rd, so we're about a month out here. But it says that the machinist, I'm probably going to have to put my glasses on. I try to print this out as big as I can, and I still got to put glasses on to read it. The machinist, the woodworker with the X35, which is the 35 millimeter linear rails, and the woodworker X50, which is the one with the bigger rails. They're saying that they're 6 to 8 weeks out on those, and then everything else, the journeyman and the frame and all the other different things they offer, looks like 10 to 12 weeks out.
Okay. All right.
But I still think that, to me, if I was going to buy one of these, that lead time wouldn't bother me a bit.
So the funny thing is, when you're making the decision to buy it, right, it feels, and I don't care if it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks, in this instant gratification world, we sometimes think any delay is hard to deal with, right? But
yeah, Amazon set the bar so high it makes everybody else look bad.
Well, but the reality of it is, you got to build a work table. For me, I had to learn CAD CAM software, so I had used Fusion 360 for 3D printing in the past, but frankly, that had been a few years ago, and that skill had kind of atrophied from lack of use, because 3D printing just takes too long. I don't have the patience for it, right? A 12-hour print for something. I was out on that pretty quick. They're like everybody else right now. They've got worldwide supply constraints, and I think that if they could, and they use the chips that everybody else uses and other parts that are just constrained globally right now. But the reality of it is, whatever machine and whatever lead time is associated with it, you got some work to do if you're like me and you're starting out with your very first machine. And I think that in this price category, it probably falls into more of the hobby user, right? So it's within the price range of most of the other offerings in the market. So I think that if you're adding this to your home shop or a companion piece in a actual wood shop, you still have some things to figure out. So the lead time actually went by really, really fast for me, because I had other things to tend to while it was on its way.
Yeah, because the Onefinity isn't like a complete thing where, like some of them, where that you get a rolling stand and all that comes with it, and so you're just waiting to put all that together. You need to have a place to set this thing, and have a good sturdy table built, and preferably a good flat surface.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really come with any kind of a table. You bolt it down yourself, and we'll let y'all talk about that because I know you got one set right there behind you.
And I just would add real quick, so sometimes I forget of the evolution that they have gone through, and it kind of again goes to the crawl, walk, run. They focused all of their attention on getting the machine, perfect, right? In the time since, so I've had mine, I guess it'd be, 12-ish months, 13 months, something like that. I really wish I could remember when I got the delivery of it. But so they actually do have a rolling stand, right? So if you're in a garage and space is important, now I don't have it because I don't have that space constraint, right? But they have a rolling table that it will fold down, and you almost like a hand truck, you can pop it back and it rolls on wheels into a corner until the next time you need it. Okay. And they have other newly added things that, frankly, just because I had mine before those accessories were available, I had already committed to a certain direction for my installation, and didn't take advantage of those accessories. But to your point, so they have what they call a quick change waste board now, which the machine can sit on, and it's apparently helps to true everything up and make you a nice flat surface, and the rolling stand. And one really crazy thing, now I don't have the space in my wood shop for it, but you can mount this thing, and they have a device, and I apologize, I don't remember the name right now, but a wall mount system. So you can mount this on the wall and operate it in a vertical position. Doesn't have to be horizontal. Yeah, yeah. And so there are YouTube videos, and I wish I could remember who had that. Yeah, it works perfect. And not only does Onefinity say it's okay, they actually sell you the wall mount kit to help you get there with it. So there have been some accessories that have come along the way since I received my machine and committed to a path of where it was going to be and all that. That I just hadn't reconfigured anything to go back and work on some of those accessories. So yeah, so they've got all that stuff now.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the different sizes. The little one is a 16 by 16 working area. The one you started with had a 32, or what'd you say, 32 and an eighth, I think?
Yeah, call it 32 square, yeah.
And then the larger one that you now have, you've upgraded, has a 48 by 32.
Yeah, so it's 48, a little over 48 in the X direction and 32 and an eighth in the Y direction. And of course you can tile with it, so it's really, to me, it's 48 inches by infinity, right? So you can put an entire sheet of plywood in the machine's working envelope and do what you need, which is really cool.
Right. And one of the first videos I saw of yours was, well, I guess it was the review video, probably the first one you did. But then, you had a really nice enclosure.
Yep.
And tell the folks what happened about that.
Yeah, so I didn't think ahead, and so that's just what happens when you're excited, right? So I got the machine, and at the time I felt like that size machine was going to be really all I could afford. The footprint in my shop anyway. So I built my table and the enclosure to just barely fit that machine's footprint. And at some point later, they announced that they had a modular update that you could apply to the machine and make it a 48-inch X rail. And even though I had previously told myself that, hey, this is all the footprint I can afford, I talked myself right into the 48-inch upgrade, right? And so that facilitated having to rebuild my former base. And as you can see behind me, I don't currently have an enclosure, and that's not by design. That is simply that in the period of time since I got the upgrade and needed to have a larger space, I just have not made the time in my schedule to remake a new enclosure that would fit. Long story short, it was short-sightedness on my part that I did not allow for any future expansion with my previous enclosure. So lesson learned.
Okay.
Always leave yourself some room.
Well, JR was kind enough to send me some photos, and I've got them queued up here. So I want to show this, and the reason I want to show this is I remember when I saw this video about your enclosure. That's what made me think, wow, I need to have this guy on the show, because not only does he have a cool machine, but he made a really nice enclosure. So tell us a little bit about this, because I know the bigger one is probably going to be just as nice as this one, JR.
Yeah, so that one I really just approached it as what I was thinking was a modular bottom. So you see I've got some drawers and some sustainers over to the right, but the tabletop was 52 by 52. And you can see in the video where I talk about this enclosure, when I move my X or Y rail forward from the back, it only cleared the interior parts of my enclosure by about 1/8 of an inch. I mean, that's how tight I made this. So the top, I was really focused more on dust control than I was about the noise abatement. So I really just wanted to make sure it was capturing any of the finer floating dust. You know, when I was cutting MDF is particularly nasty, right? So my main goal was to give it as much dust control as I could. It did reduce the. So I actually did it with just an iPhone, you know, app that measures decibels from about a 4 foot from the door, with the door open or the door closed. It did reduce it about 6 decibels. But that wasn't the primary goal for me. So the top is really just made of 1/2-inch plywood. You can see I've got some cutouts there for some windows so that I could see if there was anything going on in the machine that there was to be concerned about. And then probably the funniest thing, and we've all probably been there as we work on our shops, right? You can see the dust collection. So I run a 4-inch drop to that machine's enclosure. And the best thing I could find to connect the inside to the outside were 2 toilet flanges that you would typically put in subflooring in a house, because they just happened to be 4-inch outside diameter, and they were easy to bolt to and they were probably like $4 a piece or something, you know. So it was a very, very low tech way to bring dust collection to the interior of the machine. And so you can obviously open the doors like ambulance style, and then I found it was helpful to put the lid so that it would flip up, because, you know, as you reach in to fix your work or put your work holding together, you were going to bang your head if you didn't have some manner of ingress into the workspace.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that part, because I know I would have banged my head for sure.
Yeah.
Now tell us about. I know there's an option where you can get a little small screen that comes with this, but you opted for a looks like a bigger monitor there.
Yeah. So if I can, what I'll do is I will kind of bring this around. And the other screen that it came with was perfectly fine, in that it worked just like you would expect it to. But, you know, you might notice, you know, I'm not a small guy, right? And I've got big fingers, and this was the size that at the time, now I can't tell you what comes with it standard now, but this was the size that came with the machine when I ordered. And I just found it a little difficult to, you know, get my fingers where they needed to be. But what I really would applaud them for is they made the machine really modular, and they allowed the customization. So you can just go get, this happens to be a touch screen, but you could plug in just a monitor and then use a mouse and manipulate, you know, your screen here. So I've replaced this screen with a larger touch screen, and at the time it was pretty nominal expense to you know, give yourself a lot more, you know. And as you get a little age on you, I don't know the average age of the folks in here, but you're going to find that, you know, as you get older, even with glasses, you need a little bigger font. So
yeah, you know, like I talked to you earlier, the finger thing, the button thing wouldn't be, because my hands aren't that big, but my eyes are terrible. I need a big touch screen to be able to see what button I'm trying to hit there.
Yeah.
Let's see if I think I've got another. There's another nice view.
Oh, yeah, well, so if you flip back and forth between the two, so again, these were walnut drops off of a furniture project. So the front doors actually became walnut instead of the original doors, which were plywood, and that's just me, you know, kind of playing around.
Yeah. And I noticed too on this, and again, we're looking at the woodworker model right now, the 32 by 32.
Yep.
And I think y'all can probably see my mouse wiggling around there. Tell them what this extra bar is, what they call that. Do you remember what they call that?
Yeah, so when the machine launched, they included something called the Stiffy, and the machine would naturally come with, easy fellas. The machine would normally come with 2 of those tubes across, and that third rail, which they call the Stiffy, is really just meant to give more rigidity. And I'm going to tell you something. The machine runs great with just the 2. My personal opinion is that if you're going to go fast, and I mean if you're going to put a spindle on this thing and you're going to be looking, you know, maybe like a 2.2 kilowatt spindle, and you're gonna really try to hog out. Excuse me, I gotta turn that compressor off. Hold on 1 second. California, quiet my rear end. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So yeah, the third rail, what I would tell you is the two rails is a regular car, it's going to go fast and all that stuff. The third rail, the way I would summarize it, is that it's a roll cage inside of a sports car, maybe a rally car, right? It's just there if you are going to push the machine with a spindle and try to be the fastest and most aggressive you can be with the machine. The two by itself works just fine. But they know, like probably most companies do, that people like to tinker with their stuff. They like to chrome out their Camaro, and they like to add stuff to their shop equipment, right? So, so that originally was, they just included it as part of the original promotional, I guess, kickoff of the machine. And I don't know when, but at some point it became, and maybe still, well, it's been a while since I've looked at the ordering bank on their website, so I probably shouldn't say whether it is or isn't included because, frankly, I don't know. But they have currently the X35, which has nothing to do with the cutting size, and that kind of trips people up sometimes. And they also have an X50. And the X35 relates to the diameter of those shafts that we were just looking at. So all three of those shafts that go across would be 35 millimeter. And now on the Journeyman behind me, let me get out of the way of the camera. Of course, I always go the wrong way with the hand,
me
right?
Too. Me too.
So these rails that you see here, so those are the X50, and that simply means that they're 50 millimeters in diameter. And what I didn't know until recently, so people like to argue. It might surprise some of you in the chat, 81 people in the chat room, which that's awesome. Thank you all for being here. A lot of arguments came out about, well, square tubing is better, or round tubing, stink this or that or whatever. So I actually looked at and I sent you a picture late. I don't know if you got it, but
I will pull that up.
The wall thickness of these tubes is 1/4 of an inch. So you might.
Here's the end of the tube here.
Yeah. So it was difficult for me to measure. So I'm going to tell you, it could be either side of 1/4 of an inch, but that's a thick wall tube, and it was greater than what I expected to find. And I'm just telling you, heard a lot of people making comments about the rigidity and the heft of this machine, and that was encouraging when I was ordering it. But when I got the machine here and had to heft it up onto the bench and start to work with it, this thing's a tank. I mean, they have built this thing with some high quality stuff. I really have to tell you that.
Every single unboxing video that I've watched, and I've watched a few of them, of people unboxing these different size Onefinities, and every single one of them, when they first grab that thing to pull it out of the box, they're like, whoa, this is heavier than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, for sure. So the different notes that you're going to see, going back to your question on the website, the X35, that is the diameter of the linear shafts that they use. And just while we have the picture up, one of the things that I knew when I was searching, and again, I didn't know what I didn't know. I have never had a CNC machine, not new to woodworking, but I have a technical background, and I can tell you I understand looking at how something is put together, if it's lends itself to being a problem or not. But the things that I saw that I felt were important to me are what we're looking at here. Number one, those shafts, whether they're the X35 or the X50, they are chromed, hardened, 1/4 inch wall thickness, super robust linear shafts. They ride inside of sealed bearings instead of, so what I discovered in my journey of looking at a machine was a lot of the options in this price point were going to contain V wheels that rode on some form of an aluminum extrusion usually, and the drive mechanism was I think they're a 6 millimeter timing belt, and if I'm not right, it's something like that. It's about 6 millimeters wide, like a timing belt in your car. So the piece in the middle, that's tough to see, but the threaded portion that you see there, so that is what would take the place of a belt. If you're a person who in a group that maybe hasn't gotten to the place yet where you have researched all this, that ball screw would replace the drive belt that you would find in other machines. And generally speaking, they are able to produce more precision movement with less backlash and slop, I think is a fair way to say that. Now, I want to say I'm not speaking poorly about any of the machines that are equipped with those things, but I just knew that if I had a choice, I didn't want the V wheels and I didn't want the belts, because they just lend themselves to future maintenance needs and possibly unexpected results. And last point I'll make on this is that when the machine is rigid and there isn't flex in the machine's structure itself, that means that you will be able to have a higher speed or higher feed rate to move through your project. If you have a machine that has maybe some accuracy problems and or flex, you will have to dial down your feed rate or how fast your bit is going to move through the material in order to avoid problems. And that's why these things were so important to me when I was doing my search. And again, great thing about living here in the old USA is that you get freedom of choice, right? So what's right for me may not be right for you, but those are the specific things that led me to making the decision that I did.
Yeah, this photograph that I've got on the screen right now, I mean, this thing is just built like a beast.
Yeah.
With the ball screws, not Acme lead screws, folks. Ball screws. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And then the 50 millimeter linear rails, just a hoss. I'm telling you. There's another.
Yeah, and those are on the Y rails, right? So I only threw that one in there just so that you could see that, because I know on some machines they might have partial linear guides and partial belts and wheels. I just threw that in there to demonstrate that every axis of the machine is using the same, the same sealed bearings, the same chrome and hardened. And in fact, so this is the long, the Y rail that goes to the back. That was the one that was easiest to take the picture of, that we showed the wall thickness on. So, I just wanted to demonstrate that it's not part of the machine is built that way. The whole thing has those features. So, and then if people were curious, so this is the control box that you're going to get with the machine, with the exception of the piece that sits on top. That's actually the module that's it's plug and play with this controller, but it's a separate piece for running a laser.
I see I noticed the JTAC right there on.
Yeah, so that's the little control box if you want to run a JTAC laser, which is neat because there's a little fitment that you just snap the laser onto the head of the. You don't have to remove the router; you just snap the laser on, and you're off to the races.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we covered all of those. Now, I know that since as I look behind you there and I see the Journeyman, you had to build a whole new table, correct?
I did, and the funny thing is, so I've had a lot of stuff going on with my 9-to-5 at the same time that lumber was going crazy, right? So this probably got built, 6 months ago. I'm not sure, so forgive me, but I had to hit the easy button, and I used a Craig. I don't know what it's called, a universal bench, I think they call it. And so at the time, supply constraints, and I actually had to wait a good while for them to become available. But the lesson I learned with the first version of my machine was don't build it just to how big this is, because hell, I might move and get a bigger shop, and you never know, right? So I've left additional room so if I need to want to go with like a modular approach, I could just build a second one, butt them up together, maybe one new torsion box, and I'd be off to the races. So because of the way that they have designed this machine, that So as an example, when I upgraded from one size to the next, so the woodworker to the journeyman, it was 4 screws on each side. You know, the X rail comes off. Of course, you got to move, make the position of the Ys, move those out a little bit. But then it's just 4 more screws on the outside. Super modular and easy to adapt. So I really felt like I wanted to give myself a little extra room on this one, and then also make it somewhat modular. So, and then I'm a big fan of torsion boxes, and I know that there's, just like every other argument on the internet, how much does a wet dog weigh? This is the same. Does it matter? Does it not matter? I can only tell you that I like the assurance of having a torsion box, because if at some point in the future I'm having difficulties, truing up, because I use this a lot to flatten slabs for, like live edge stuff. And I just didn't want to fight with any inconsistencies in my work surface that the machine was going to be bolted to. So that's a 48 by 72 inch top, and the maximum deviation, and I recorded that in a video, my maximum deviation. Now I only have a 3 foot long straight edge, right? So there's a limit to what I'm measuring, but it was 6/1000 of an inch. So I felt like I've given myself the best possible platform to build the machine on and the spoil board.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've now got plenty of room for that larger enclosure that I assume you.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And my wife, God bless her, she always reminds me, hey, you really shouldn't, leave this thing uncovered. We got to get that dust handled. And so she's my excellent reminder that I still have that task to do. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I know you're, still, I guess, a newbie at CNC stuff, but so far, what is your favorite project that you've made with your Onefinity CNC?
Well, there's probably 2. So my wife grew up reading Tolkien, and she's not really a fan of the movies, but because she grew up a fan of J.R.R. Tolkien and The Hobbit, so I did a 14-hour carve on this thing of a map of Middle-earth, and then from a 150-year-old barn that was taken down, I made a frame and, gave some very intricate, used some molding paths and some other designs in the picture frame, and that was a gift for her birthday. And you know what I love, and guys and gals, buy the one that you want to buy. This isn't a commercial for Onefinity, although it may sound like it, as excited as I am about what I think this machine is. The neatest thing is that you're making one of one, right? The thing that you dream up in your software to give to somebody as a piece of furniture or as a gift like that, there isn't another one like it. You can't go to Target and buy it. You can't get it off Amazon. You made it for somebody, and there's only that one, right? And then the second piece is kind of a group of stuff. My daughter, I think I mentioned earlier, had moved out. Part of why I haven't had the time to do my enclosure is that, she was telling me she was looking for furniture for her apartment, and I built her a whole damn apartment full of furniture, a bedroom suite and bookcases and desks for, so that kept me busy in my free time after work for the last couple of months. But so those have probably been my 2 favorite things, and I used my CNC to add a lot of treatments to her furniture that she wanted to have custom made into it, and it was just a neat way to do it.
Okay. Another question I have here is, since this is your first CNC, and like I said, you haven't had it a real long time, you're still kind of new at it, what would you consider the learning curve? Was it easier or harder than what you expected?
So I would say that the machine, when looking at it through the lens of someone who hadn't had one previously, I thought that the machine itself was going to be the hurdle. And I'm not, I don't struggle with computers, but you put me in front of of a design program where you have to go from zero to something, and sometimes I struggle with that. I'd call it that creative side, if that makes sense. And so where I really feel like I didn't spend enough time in the period when I was waiting for my machine was getting more used to the software. And there are several out there to use. I mean, Vectric is certainly popular. Carveco is popular. And then there's Easel, and gosh, I'm probably leaving some out, and it's not on purpose. I don't use those other ones, so I'm maybe not be as familiar. So probably for me, I think the biggest hurdle was becoming proficient within Vectric, which is the one that I have ended up favoring. So I actually have both Vectric and Carveco. I think it's Maker Plus, and I think it's just the same as if you're a Windows Windows fan or a Mac fan. It's just they do the same thing. It's just where are the buttons and how do they act, and I'd call it the user interface, right? And I just found that for the way that I work, Vectric worked the best for me. But having said that, that was probably one of the things I had to work the hardest on or spend the most time getting my head around. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. So it kind of goes along with that. What is the most difficult thing that you've had to learn as a CNC newbie?
Oh, goodness, that's a good one. Man, you could have sent me these questions ahead of time and let me think about them for a minute. The hardest thing to get my head around, I would have to say using the molding tool paths to create, shaped, long beam type structures, right? That is, for me, that kind of bent my head for a little bit to get that correct. And where it comes into play for me, or really the only place I've ever used it, is making custom picture frames that were very specific to how I wanted them to be. I could have done it with any other tool in my shop, but I was focused and trying to learn something new with the CNC, and so I forced myself to do it that way, simply to get past that obstacle. That was difficult for me to figure out.
Okay.
I have an education, but it's public, so there it is.
So you went a lot more deeper than I thought, because I was thinking something like, well, I always forget to turn the router on before I hit cycle start or something like that.
Yeah, well, I've certainly done that, right? And that has cost me a bit before, but you can fix that with $30, right? Where I really kind of had to pound my head against a brick wall was, and I would just encourage all the folks who are in the chat too, it's great, you got to start, you got to get used to, even like Dave is saying, don't forget to turn the router on before you hit start, right? That is a thing. But, don't be afraid to challenge yourself. It would have been super easy for me to just go buy a damn picture frame, right? Or just make it on my table saw on my router table. But it was a challenge to figure out, and I was very glad to have gotten across that finish line once I did. But you're going to have to push yourself in some of those areas. So kind of the mechanical side of it, I have probably done every silly thing that you could do in terms of forget to turn something on, or you jog your machine one way or the other and you forget to raise the Z up out of the work. If you had to hit stop for some, you just snap that bit right off there. Thing about a CNC that I learned is that it will do exactly what you tell it to do, even if that's not what you wanted. So,
right or wrong, it will do exactly what you tell it to do.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think you've made it through my list of questions. I don't think I've skipped over any. Is there anything? I know you've got the machine sitting right back there behind you. Is there anything that you want to show us before we start taking the questions from our viewers?
I think rather than me assume that somebody wants to know something that I thought was interesting, I would just tell you this, and Dave, if you don't mind, I'm going to plug my channel for a second.
Absolutely.
So if you have interest in this machine, I do have a video where I reviewed the Onefinity CNC, and it's trade. Thank you, Dave. It's Trade Skillers Anonymous. So I don't want to drag you through the knothole of telling you my journey. In a video there where I review the Onefinity, I kind of go over, and I tell you in the video that I'm not new to woodworking, but I was new to CNC, and I went and visited people who had other machines. And then, of course, like all of us, I did online research. I even joined some of the other groups that exist out there that support, or community groups for other manufacturers, to try to do that research for myself. And I cover all that in this video. And I would just ask, stop on over there and, have a look at that video if you care to. And I go into a lot of the stuff. I go into my enclosure. I go into spoil boards. What I decided to do, work holding, things that I thought were interesting for me to learn. I will just say, Dave, this probably is more relative to your question before. What's the one thing that I think that I've gotten wrong more times than any other thing is that now this machine will go fast and it'll go deep. The rigidity of the machine will give it to you, right? Every failure that I have had, now maybe somebody else's experience is different, has been relating to not having my work properly held to my spoil board. I either was relying on something that didn't hold the way I thought it would, or it just came loose, or maybe I was driving through the material faster than I should have been and the work holding failed. It's never been the machine. It's been that I either didn't secure it, or my work holding just didn't work out. So. Mm-hmm. But yeah, please stop by, and of course, if you like anything I'm doing, maybe give it a subscribe, and like some of those videos over there. I'd certainly appreciate it. It's what motivates me to do more. And not that I could teach you the whole world, but I feel like if we can teach each other the things where we've skinned our knees or bumped our toes by just being out front with it, maybe there's some benefit there. But I really went over the whole machine in a couple of videos, so I probably wouldn't bore you with all that here. Maybe there are some questions that we should tackle.
Yeah, I just realized I did leave out one question, and I want to ask that because I saw you online last night, and I guess a month or so ago, I can't remember how long it was, you and some other Onefinity owners hosted a Q&A live stream.
Yeah.
Do you plan on continuing to do that?
Yeah, so we actually talked about it yesterday. So we did it in the beginning of December, and we really tried to just bring through the lens of a brand new person, what are the things that you kind of struggle with, right? And it's silly, like the things that I didn't do on day one. You might save a file in Vectric and think, like we've all grown up with Windows files, so I'm done. So I go Windows file, save as, put it on a thumb drive, and go take it to my machine. Well, that's the design file. It's not the G-code file. And so just little simple steps like that I know I goofed up on. We tried to pick a couple of topics, and there's so many great people over on the Onefinity Facebook group. So Lane and Mitz, the three of us kind of took on one topic apiece, and then we did a Q&A. And the surprising thing was that it went over 2 hours, which wasn't intentional on our part, but it just kind of it flowed, and nobody was in a rush to leave. We are going to aim to do another one in February. And so again, if you're interested, stop by the Onefinity Facebook group, or you can. I wish. Hey, Lane, if you're here, or Mitz, if you guys pop your channel name in there, they have really dedicated an entire YouTube channel to I think it's Onefinity training and tips. So that Q&A will either be on mine or theirs, or maybe even both. When it happens, but we'll certainly announce it. But we're hoping to do it again in February, so to answer your question.
Okay.
And that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching that. Both of them, as a matter of fact. All right, we have an awesome group of folks over there, looks like, and we're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, we're going to let JR tackle your questions. Hey guys and gals, I hope you're enjoying the show, and if so, let me tell you about a few ways you can help support the show, and some of them don't even cost you anything. First off, you can hit the thumbs up button, and if you're not already subscribed, click the subscribe button. Both of those things don't cost a penny and really help the YouTube analytics. Another great way to help support the show is to send me a YouTube super chat. You can do that by clicking on the $sign at the bottom of the live chat window. And finally, and probably the easiest way, is to buy me a coffee. There is a buy me a coffee link down below in the description. And that is just a few easy ways you can help support the show. I really appreciate every single one of you being here watching. So let's get back at it. All right, we are back, and JR's got his, I'm going to assume that's coffee.
It is coffee, yes.
It may not be, but we'll just call it coffee.
It is coffee, yes.
All right, are you ready to tackle some tough questions? You thought mine were tough.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, I'm just going to take these in the same order that my buddy Ryan pinned them back here. Troy Pritchard asks, do you have a fourth axis on your CNC?
No, I do not, and I do not think that the Onefinity can do a fourth axis. So again, the CNC machine, I wasn't even sure it would fit into my workflow that I was doing before. So those fourth axes are neat, but that's probably something that I'd say I'm a few years away from figuring out how I would put it to good use. So mine does not. No.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, though.
The next question is from the Blaine Train. He says, how sturdy does the table actually have to be? There are videos and products like the movable cart from Onefinity itself that look awful flimsy and wobbly.
Yeah, so I've seen some tables that I wondered about, right? But in reality, I think that as long as your spoil board, the work table that the spoil board is attached to, and your CNC machine, if those three components are mounted together in a very strong fashion, your legs could wibble and wobble some, and I think that the machine is going to stay relative to the work table and the spoil board. I would probably suggest to you that you should have as stout a table as you can, because if you have a very high jerk rate, that's the movement to acceleration to the next move, it can really produce some inertia in your table, and my preference would be to make that as stable as you could possibly make it. But yeah, I've seen some tables that I wondered about before. Would you agree with that, Dave, that as long as the machine, the spoil board, and the work surf, the tabletop, are as a unit solid, I guess you could argue there'd be some...
That's the part that needs to be solid. The table legs, I mean, if you can build one rock solid, great.
Yeah.
But I found from my experience it doesn't really matter, because the whole machine might be shaking the wobbly legs, but everything is staying where it should be and doesn't affect the cut. Let's see who we got next here. Don Schnar says, JR, I'm looking at purchasing one of these and wonder what software you are using.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Don. So I can tell you I'm using Vectric Pro, and there were a few things that were important to me, and I would just say you got to do some research, right? There are free trials of almost every software offering that are out there, and my greatest suggestion to anyone is to download the free trials that you're interested in and just see if you like the file system, where the buttons are. Does it feel intuitive to you, right? Most of them are going to do pretty much the same thing. They have different cost structures. Some of them are subscription based, which means it might be $15 or $20 a month forever. Vectric, as an example, is you buy the license one time, and that entitles you to a certain number of updates over a period of time, but you own the software. I went with Vectric simply because it made the most sense to me, the way that I would look to push buttons and work within the software environment. It just clicked with me, for lack of a better phrase. But really strongly recommend that you try some trial versions that are usually free and just see how they feel to you.
Okay. This isn't really a question, more of a comment, I guess. Clyde says, looks like ball screws and linear bearings.
Yep, that's correct.
And beefy ones at that, as we showed in the pictures earlier.
And I only want to touch that up for just there is a difference in bearings, right? So the first part of my career, I was a technician, automotive technician. That these bearings are sealed means a world of difference, right? Because, in a CNC environment, it's just swirling dust, and if you plan to use a CNC for, some CNC machines, including this one, can do non-ferrous metals, so you don't want any of that stuff inside the bearing cage, right? So that's so they are ball screws and they are linear bearings, but specifically the thing I really loved is that they chose to go with a more premium bearing in that it is a sealed bearing.
Mm-hmm. All right, another one from the Blaine train here. He says, how important is an enclosure to the X50s if you have a 2.2 kilowatt spindle on the way? I want to be prepared for the X50's arrival, but don't want to go bananas on things I don't need.
Okay. I think that enclosures are like underwear. Some people wear them and some people don't. And it's just how you like to roll, right? If dust dust control is important to you, you're probably going to want to look at a enclosure. If noise is a thing to you, a plywood enclosure is probably not going to solve most of the noise for you. You'd probably have to add maybe some noise abatement material, like think of egg crate material or the foam or sound deadening material. I would just tell you, I think it's a very personal decision. Last night we were talking about it, and I was the only one out of 3 that were chatting that has added in the past an enclosure. So I really just think it depends on your workspace. The other thing I think it came up as an interesting comment was that in your shop, you're going to have a certain amount of dust flying around if you're doing other woodworking, and that is all going to land on the machine as well. So an enclosure would help to protect casual dust, I'll call it, from finding its way onto your machine. So, but I think that, Blaine, it's really up to you. If it's not worth the investment, if I was 50 yards from the house and had really good dust collection and maybe some air filtration, I might not mess with it. My main thing was just get the dust under control, especially if you're using MDF. MDF just sucks.
Oh yeah, that's it's the worst.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Harry Ragland says, I can't find the stepper ounce-inch specs on the Onefinity site. How powerful are the steppers? They look small. Do you happen to know the torque specs?
I do not, but I can put it in my life for you in the following way. I will regularly, and I'm not suggesting that you do this, but I will regularly do profile cuts, full, both sides of the bit captured, right? So not skimming the outside, but full passes, 250 thousandths of an inch with a 1/4 inch end mill at about 125 inches per minute, and it takes all of it, as long as I've got a good bit in there. And I think that's a fairly aggressive cut, 1/4 of an inch deep, at 120-ish inches per minute. I have never had a situation where the stepper motors didn't do something that I was expecting it to do.
It's interesting that came up, because I had the same question at one time, because I kept looking and looking, and all I could find was that they're NEMA 23s, but I never could find the torque specs on them. But I found it somewhere, so I've got the website open. I'm gonna continue to look as we keep going through these questions here and see if I can.
Would it say it on the label? Would it say it on the label? I don't know.
Well, it might. I know I was kind of surprised that it was not what I thought it would be, because the way everything else is like really beefy. Let's see if I can.
Yeah, I think that I would tell you I'm not an expert at that.
I think it was when I was on here just clicking and acting like I was going to order one just to see if the so you can get pricing and stuff. But let me see if that's where I saw the specs, because I know I finally did find it somewhere,
Okay.
but I don't recall right off the top of my head what it was. But I'll keep looking for that.
Yeah, maybe we'll come back to that one.
All right, let's see. Todd HCNC says, "How is it loading material with that enclosure?" Well, I guess he's talking about your older enclosure, but
Yeah, no, it wouldn't have presented any problem. Although I will tell you that I think in the next enclosure, I'm going to make sure that I have greater access to the sides, just in case I have to get to work holding that's back there. So the depth of the machine currently is 32 1/8 inches, right? The working envelope, anyhow. So it's not a terrible reach if you've got to get all the way to the back to, if you have a really large workpiece you're working on. It wouldn't be super difficult to just reach in there and apply some work holding back there. Yeah.
okay. Let's see here. Chris E says, "How would you connect a wireless keyboard and mouse to the controller? With a USB dongle?"
Yeah. So, and Onefinity actually sells something that I think is, pretty neat, and it does use that feature. And so you use this. I know not all controllers have something like this, and this looks like, you'd play a video game with it. But it uses a USB dongle, but you simply control the machine, by using the sticks on this little guy here. Z control, and of course X and Y. So I would imagine, and again, I don't work for Onefinity, so I would imagine that if you had the right combination, there could be compatibility issues with some, I don't know, but you're using a USB dongle for this, so I can't imagine, that the others would work. I have heard people, though, that put, again, maybe their eyes are even worse than mine, but they mount big TVs up on the back and just run a wired mouse and keyboard to the controller, and it works perfectly for them, apparently. So, and this machine, I should mention, probably also, it also has Wi-Fi, so a lot of times I'm over at a different computer, which is where I have Vectric installed, and where, my machine and my computer are on the same network, so I just push, my G-code to the machine using my Wi-Fi network. So, when you do that and you have that connection, this whole screen that you see here behind me, that's the view that you would have on your computer if you were on the same network. You could pull it up on a web page and see that whole thing and interact with the machine. So I feel like that's a neat deal. Does not have to be wired right to it, and you don't have to be connected to the internet if you choose not to. So.
Okay, Chris also asked, any particular brand for the keyboard and mouse, like Logitech? I assume any of them would work, right?
So I only use that that game controller. I think they call it the Joypad on their website. I do not have a keyboard and a mouse connected to mine. I use my computer, which is connected to the same network, to do anything of that sort. I do it right from a computer via a Wi-Fi connection. So I can't tell you that I have ever hooked one of those deals to the controller here. So I can't give you the advice, but hey, Amazon's got a pretty liberal return policy. So if you don't like it, send it back to Jeff, right?
Yeah. All right. Todd I guess he was asking Jerry that was looking at the website earlier what the footprint is. I happen to have that up right here. The footprint for the machinist, which is the smaller one with the 16 by 16 cutting area, is 29 3/8 by 21 3/4. with 5.5 inches. I guess that's the height. The woodworker, which is the one that JR first had, was 45 and 3/8 inches by 37 and 3/4 inches by 5.5. And the one he has now, the big boy, is 61 and 3/8 inches by 53 and 3/4 inches by 5.5. And I am still not finding. I thought for sure because it says specifications and features, and I thought, oh, this is where I found the thing about the steppers, but I do not see it.
And I know that a lot of the folks that may be in your normal audience are probably used to either building yours or modifying one, right? I just don't have that experience, so that I hate to say I was uninformed kind of about that. I can only tell you from the user experience, I haven't ever had a stepper motor lose steps or choke on anything I was asking it to do.
Okay, I'm looking. Maybe this is where I ended up finding it, but I'm looking on the forum. Yeah, this is where it was. It says, and this is somebody asking the question. He says, I want to know what type of DEMA 23 stepper motors are being used on the CNC, specifically the torque rating. And somewhere, let's see where it's at.
And I'd be willing to bet, Dave, that there's probably a difference between some of the machines, right? As you have more mass on some of them, they might, because I know on my Journeyman X-Rail, that motor is different in size than the Y-Rail. So there's probably more than one spec.
Okay.
But I'm only guessing because I'm seeing a size difference. Again, that's a deeper question than I was prepared to take on.
Yeah, well, I'm trying, like I said, I'm trying to find it, and I swear I did find it the other day, and I don't remember what it was. I should have written it down. But, okay, here we go. 270 ounce is what, at least this is somebody that's answering the question in the forum. And that, like I said, that's probably less than what I would have guessed, but it's still enough to get the job done. So 270 ounce, according to the Onefinity CNC forum. I guess I don't know if this is the official forum or not. I guess it is. Yeah.
Okay.
If there is an official forum, I'm assuming there is. Okay, let's see. Still got a few more questions here. Another one from Blaine. He says, oops, here we go. JR, knowing what you know now about your Onefinity, what options would you say are worth getting when you order to make your experience better right out of the gate? There are so many.
Okay. That's a great question. Thanks, Blaine. So I would tell you that question comes up, and I guess I want to preface this by saying that I recognized in myself that I was spending $2,000, on the machine, right? So when it came to the little stuff, the touch probe and this they call it joypad, right, which looks like a Game Boy or whatever the hell that stuff is they play now. I just went for all that stuff, and I'm glad that I did, right? So there was a conversation the other day. Somebody was asking, and I don't know what this thing costs. This is the touch probe, and there are varying opinions about this. Use a piece of paper and just eyeball it, that type of stuff on the X and the Y. I felt like something like this was so important because if I lost power in the middle of my carve and I had to reset my X, Y, and start again, I don't want to eyeball that. I want to know I can get back to where I was, right? This thing here now, not recently, but probably 9 months ago, there were a bunch of people who had bought a certain kind, and we're having difficulties with compatibility or whatever, and it just blows my mind when people are sitting there with their computer. They're going to spend a couple $1,000s and they're trying to save $10 buying this from somebody that they're not sure it's compatible,
yeah.
or this one, oh, I could buy it for $10 off of eBay or whatever. And I'm like, I just don't understand why you would do that. So Blaine, to answer your question, what I started with, and there's none of it that I regret, is the joypad, right, and the touch probe, because it will, to me, it was very reassuring to know that I was using the right or the recommended method to get my workpiece zeroed out. There's currently, or has been in the past, some confusion about the way that the ordering goes on the website now. Back when I ordered it, it was all, the machine came with a controller. And when I say controller, I mean that black box that we had a picture of with the big red, oh crap button on it, not this. Because there are people who would rather put a different controller, and I don't know what kind of genius you got to be to figure all that out, but I know it's not me, right? So the controller, which is the brains, this gamepad or joypad, this touchpad, and I think that's, there's a suck-it dust boot that I think is maybe an option. I'm not sure. You want to make sure that you're using some form of dust control, dust evacuation, but that's really about it. I don't know that you have to check every box, but I think that what I wouldn't do in the conversation that comes up from time to time is, that people feel like they can save $1 or $2 going and finding these pieces from an off brand, and my advice would be, don't do that. Just get it all from the source. That way, if you ever have a problem or a question, they're going to support it. If you call them and say, hey, I bought this one off eBay and I can't get it to work, I need help, they're probably not going to be super motivated, right? So, and I've never seen that to be the case, but that's just my guess. If you're going to be into laser work and you want to add a laser, they have a laser attachment. It's a JTEC 7-watt laser. I have that, but I did not buy that initially. I wanted to get the machine and get my head around that. I've probably only had that about 3 or 4 months.
Okay. Just getting back to the stepper motor question, I just saw a comment over here that I didn't see before. Let's see, where'd it go? Dale Peterson says, go to Onefinity's website, click on shop, and then replacement parts. Thank you for that, Dale, because I've done that now, and it looks like the only one they offer as a replacement is a NEMA 23 178.4 ounce. So that is pretty small, but when the rest of the machine is as beefy as it is, that must get it done.
Well, I guess, and again, I know this is going to sound super unscientific, right? But I guess what I'm wondering is if you compare that to a machine that has some other form of transportation across rails, whether they're wheels or belts and all that stuff, I wonder if being on bearings and these round shafts, if that eases the movement and maybe requires less. I have no frame of reference for what's a big one or what's a small one, right? So I understand what you're saying, that through whatever lens. Hang on, I'm getting a fresh cup of coffee here.
Well, when they talk about the NEMA 23, that's basically just the physical size, the bolt pattern, that kind of thing. But it's the torque rating, the holding torque is what, usually in most cases, bigger is better.
And I understand that for sure. I guess my unscientific way is to say I've never had it stall out or do something unexpected.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Getting back to Blaine's got another question. It says, "What are the things we should be doing, in your opinion, to prepare ourselves and our environments for as good a beginning to our journey as possible?"
Well, Blaine, from my lens, what I would tell you is the area. My machine showed up, and now being a woodworker, I didn't struggle building a good first table for it, right? But I wish that I would have spent more time once I made the decision that Vectric was the way I was going to go. And for me, what happened is I got in there and I played around, I watched the tutorials, but because I couldn't output an actual product, right, a project, I couldn't bring it to a machine because my machine wasn't here, it kind of was not all that fun, so I quit practicing, frankly, and then the machine showed up, and on day one, and I assembled it in less than an hour. That was one of the other great things about this machine is they are stupid easy to put together. And I stood there and I went, okay, so spoil boards first. So I got to figure that out. And I went over to the computer and I stared at it for about 20 minutes, not knowing exactly how I should approach, making my spoil board. So for me, my suggestion would be to, do some of that, looking around, make a decision on which software you're going to use, and then really commit to learning it, watching YouTube videos, and then also open it up on your computer and actually do it. Because I caught myself a little flat-footed by not doing enough preparation to get my brain ready for Vectric. Because once I got past my spoil board, well, then I didn't know how to do project number 2. And I had to really learn. The machine sat here doing nothing while I figured out how to do what I was trying to do, if that makes sense. So, yeah, as far as your workspace, I would say, give yourself a good shot at making a table. Blaine, I don't know if you do other types of woodworking. I know that to some degree there are people coming into this vertical that this is their first real woodworking experience, and so they might have a power drill and a driver, but might not even have a circular saw at the house. So I don't know where you are in that space, but I would certainly make sure that you have a suitable workbench, dedicated for the use for your CNC machine. And second to that, because that one's kind of easy to check off, I'd really spend some evenings going into the software. What do you recommend to people, Dave, when someone's coming into it new?
Well, as you mentioned, you need to learn the software. Unless you had, see, it's hard for me to say because my background was I already knew how to draw things. I knew how to do 3D modeling. So I had a totally different background than most people that get into this. A lot of people don't even know how to spell CNC when they buy one.
Yeah.
And there's just so many things to learn, and can be a bit overwhelming, I guess. But you definitely, if the sooner you can learn whatever software you pick, whether it's the free stuff, maybe F-Engrave or Easel or Carveco or Vectric or whatever the heck it is you decide to go with, try to learn that. And because the sooner you can design and actually make something, the happier you're going to be with your CNC.
Yeah. I just hated that I was standing in front of my machine and wasn't as up to speed with the software as I should have been. That was my lesson learned. So,
All right, let's see. We got a few more questions here. Henry says, wondering on your opinion on the standard Makita router versus upgrading to a water or air cooled spindle.
So let me see if I can get my pointer correct. So that back there on the wall is a VFD, and so that runs a spindle. I can tell you that for most people, myself included, a router is going to do most everything that you're going to throw at it. To go to a spindle is a premium experience in terms of it isn't necessarily going to give you higher quality work. It's going to be able to move through some things better than a router would. But frankly, most people aren't they're not taking the capabilities of a Makita to the end of its envelope. I got a little bored in the period of time from the time I hit the order button to when it showed up, and I saw all these neat things that people were talking about in the forums, and I said, oh, well, of course I got to have a spindle. It's the chrome blower sticking out of the hood, right? So again, I have a technical background. I'm comfortable. Now I had an electrician do my, wall outlets and all that stuff. But I was very comfortable getting the VFD set up, acquiring the right wire, which, is a high, what do they call it? A high flexibility, double shielded, it's robotic wire, right? And I was comfortable wiring all that. But you're going to need to understand you're screwing around with 220 volts, right? So 110 will get you, but 220, there's no question, you're done, right? So I had an issue where the aircraft connector, because I bought this cheap Chinese hunk of shit, package, and the aircraft connector, was insufficient. I had to grind out some of it, to make the sheathing of my robotic wire fit, and then the aircraft connector failed. I have since purchased a much better aircraft connector to attach to it, but here's what happened. I had the spindle on. It is, in my opinion, quieter when it's free spinning and it's not working on a piece of wood. It is marginally quieter, in my opinion, at least in my environment, when it is actually cutting, right? Because really a lot of that noise is the cutter versus the wood. The motor sound, I think all the benefit really goes away once you are engaged into the wood. But when I had the issue with my electrical connector on the spindle itself, I had work that I needed to do, so I took all that crap off and I put the router back in, which I started with the machine. And honestly, I just haven't made the time to go back and put that spindle back in there because I just don't feel like the benefit for the work that I'm doing. Now, the thickest work I'm doing is 2 inches, 2-inch thick walnut. So I don't know if there's people that do stuff that's a heck of a lot thicker than that, but I just found that the bang for the buck wasn't really there for most people, myself included. I guess is the best way I could sum that up.
Okay.
But if you want the blower sticking out of the hood of your Camaro, then the spindle's the way to go. But just please be careful.
Yeah, I would agree. Clyde here is asking about the pitch of the ball screws. I doubt if you know the answer to that, and I have been looking on the website here because I knew that question was coming up, and I don't see it that they list that. They don't get that detailed in their specs, I guess.
Yeah, I have to admit that I don't know that. I know that they spin and the carriage moves, and that's where it stopped for me. So yeah. I apologize, but I don't look real hard at those technical parts, I guess.
All right, here's a question. Says, I was wondering what is the thickest non-ferrous metal that anybody has used and was successful?
Okay.
Have you cut any, like aluminum or anything with your machine?
I have not, but there's a fella who's got one of these machines we were just speaking with last night who made himself a tramming gauge, right? So a 2 dial indicator tramming gauge, and it appeared to be somewhere around, I thought it was like 3/4. He didn't measure it, but he thought maybe it was 5/8 of an inch thick, and it came out beautifully.
Yeah, I saw that. I was watching that last night, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, so
finish on it.
So I guess I would tell you 3/4 of an inch is the thickest thing that I have seen somebody mill, and he milled out, the entirety of that 3/4 or 5/8 or whatever it was. So it wasn't just a shallow pocket. I mean, he profiled the whole thing, if that's what you're asking, and I think it is.
Okay, this one is going to be an interesting one, I think. Todd H. CNC says, I assume it has homing switches.
Yeah, so that actually is one of the things that is different about this machine. So it does not use homing switches. It uses what they call stall homing. So if you are familiar with electrical current, right, if you were to hold your drill motor on a certain speed, and then if you had the ability to slow the chuck down or stop the chuck, the amperage that's going to that motor under that load is going to increase. The way that this machine works is it goes through a homing cycle where you know, it's a function of the controller. You say yes, home the machine, and the Z comes up to the top of its physical travel, runs into the physical stop, and the computer watches for an increase. And when I say an increase, I'm talking about probably more than tenths of an amp. They measure a very small current change, and when it goes to the top there, it knows it's at its physical stop, and it registers with the controller. Then it goes to the left of the X travel, same idea. It hits a physical stop, the current goes up on that motor, and they see, okay, that's there, and then same thing with the Y to the forward. And a lot of people ask if that is, you know, repeatable at the same level that, you know, mechanical switches are. And I think that what we haven't talked about ever is that back in the 90s, I worked on a car called the General Motors EV1. It was the first all-electric car, and it was only in Southern California. So I'm familiar with how electronics work. So the way that I have usually kind of thought about that is that the barrier to accurate homing is usually not a switch. And if I were to choose how I was going to home something, because I know, you know, electricity is pretty slow. It only moves at the speed of light, right? So it's very easy to measure differences in current. And so as a result, if I had to pick, I'd be fine with a stall current homing method, because the barrier to accurate homing is usually dirt. Dirt on a switch, you know, the contact or the roller that's usually at the end of that contactor, the switch itself, you know, how much flex does the arm have, you know, before it actually closes the contact inside the switch. I mean, you could probably, again, have good arguments on the internet as to, you know, what's better, McDonald's or Burger King. But this one here, it uses that, and I have been really surprised where how accurate it can be. So it does not have homing switches, and that's actually something that I like, because I have a tendency to trust measuring electrical current more than I would trust a mechanical switch in a CNC environment's not clean. It's dirty, dusty, and all that stuff. So
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I have watched several unboxing videos and assemblies, and you know, of course, when they get the thing put together, first thing they do is home it. And if you didn't know that it didn't have, you know, that it doesn't come with homing switches, you would think it did, because it to me it's nice and smooth, and I would think that it's really not that much different than using a proximity switch.
Oh yeah, that's another great way to do it.
Kind
too,
of the
yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting down to the bottom of the questions here, I think. Blaine says, are there community sites with design/G code for projects like spoil board for CNCs, kind of like a Thingiverse for 3D printing?
So I don't use that type of stuff. I know they're out there. I know people buy files from Etsy. Are there specific ones that you guys, Dave,
Well,
or?
I think there are kind of like Facebook groups and stuff, but I think with the CNC thing, it's more specific to whatever brand of CNC you have, because, you know, if somebody does a spoil board for a Onefinity woodworker size, it may not work with something else, you know. So, you know, I'm sure they share files. I'm sure if you went to the Onefinity Facebook group and looked in the file section, you would find stuff there. But I don't think it's quite like Thingiverse, where no matter what kind of 3D printer you have, you can get a model and probably print it. It's probably not quite the same with CNCs, because there's so many different ones.
Yeah, so Blaine, I think, you know, Dave brings up a great point. So Vectric outputs a I think it's CRV extension, right, for its design file. It's, you know, what you're going to find if you want to do artwork or, something where you want to go buy a design. Maybe you don't have, if you're like me, I don't have a creative mind. I could not draw a leaf or a mountainscape that somebody would be interested in carving. So you're probably going to find that what you'll access more than most things are .svg files. So those are scalable vector graphics. Most CAD software programs can import those, and then you can make out of the shape the thing that you want. I would be cautious about using someone else's spoilboard file, even if it is from the same piece of software that you might happen to use. And what I mean by that is, never use somebody else's toolpath. So if the file that you acquire from somebody else, before you just run that file, make sure that it's going to work with your machine, your feeds and speeds that you're using with your bits. And I might be over explaining that, but there are places out there, and Dave's right, inside the Facebook group, I forgot about that, there are people who share all kinds of creative projects from, I'm sure, various different software CAD systems.
Yeah, one thing I would caution you, though, Blaine, is if you're in a file section, and I'm not saying that it's that way in the Onefinity Facebook group, but in any of them, if you go to get a file, make sure before you use that file, and especially if it's something you want to make and sell, make sure that the person that's sharing that file has the right to share it, and it's not some copyrighted thing. There's a lot of that goes on, and it's you can get yourself in some trouble. Going, well, I bought it from this guy, so they don't care about that. So just make sure whatever files you share and that you get from somebody else that are, that I always tell people in my groups, if you didn't create it, don't share it, because it's probably copyrighted somewhere or belongs to somebody else. Okay, I think we got one last question here, unless there's any more coming in. Dale Peterson says, talking about homing, is it normal for the stops to be somewhat violent? Sometimes mine will clunk quite hard during homing.
Yeah, mine clunks. So what's stopping, the travel that you have is metal contact, right? So when one stops against another, and it is a physical stop, so it doesn't run at it, right? It's not trying to blast through the wall, but it's going to move until it can't move anymore. And I will tell you that mine, it does give a little clunk kind of noise when it finds the physical end of its travel.
JR, we didn't talk really much about or at all, I guess, about the controller. But if you were having, when you home it and you thought it was clunking or hitting a little bit too loud, do you have the ability to go in and change the speed at which it homes so that you could slow it down?
Yeah. So not only do you have control over all that speed of the homing, travel, you have control. Like if you find that your machine, let's say at 8, and I'm just making this up, right? If you find over time the bearings are aging, or you're a slacker about keeping it clean and they've gotten dirt in there, and maybe it's got more physical resistance to move, you can dial up the amperage, the sensing, and the amount of energy that's going to that motor. So if you had worn out bearings, let's say 5 years from now or whatever, and it was not actually getting to the home, the physical home, but it stopped because it thought it was there, because it's got more resistance than it used to, you can dial that up until it actually gets to the home. You can change all of the settings for the jerk settings and max velocities for normal operations. So again, I'm a year plus, a shade over a year into this thing, and so I can tell you I don't adjust too much stuff in there, because when it works, it works. But my jerk speed, I moved it. I think it got set in an update, or normally it's maybe 1,000 jerk or something. I typically run mine at about 8,000. There are people who run it at 12,000. So there are things you can do in there to, make all kinds of adjustments, including. And Dale, maybe if you have the Onefinity, maybe yours is maybe your amperage going to that motor is a little higher than it needs to be for the homing sequence, and maybe it needs to come down. I don't know. Don't go doing that on my word, you know. But if you feel that it's an objectionable amount of a clunk, you know, maybe contact them and say, you know, what could I do, because it feels a little much, perhaps. But mine does the same damn thing, and I just, as long as it homes, that's all I care about, you know. So.
All right, one last question from Mr. Keith Painter. He says, are the gantry uprights steel or aluminum?
Well, I believe they're aluminum. Let me double check. That'll sound silly, but I've never checked. Life for a magnet.
All right, we've got some people in the chat saying aluminum, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's aluminum, but I don't, you know, I'm always worried I'm going to tell you the wrong thing, so.
I would guess aluminum.
Yeah. It is certainly not magnetic. I'm going to tell you that it's aluminum.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If y'all give me, you know, give me about a week, I'll get a Rockwell hardness tester on it. And
All righty. Well, we are an hour and 40, almost 45 minutes in. This has been a longer than normal show, but very, very informative. I appreciate all of y'all hanging out with us in the chat over there. We've had a good crowd over there all night, and thank you so much for the great questions.
yeah, thank you guys.
Had some awesome questions. And you know, if there's anybody out there that's thinking about getting into CNC, you know, anybody that knows me, I have like well, as of right now, I have 3 CNCs in my garage, all different kinds. And I've even got more than that in parts laying around. So if I worked at it, I could probably put together a couple of more. So I'm definitely a guy who does not need another CNC. But I have to say, if I was thinking about getting a CNC, I definitely would take a long, hard look at the Onefinity, because just when I started watching the videos, because I'd heard about them and seen them mentioned in the groups on Facebook and stuff, and I thought, oh, let me just check out one of these things. And when I first saw it, I thought, holy cow, that thing just seems to be just as stout as it can be. So anyway, hope anybody that was thinking about it or wanting to get more information about them enjoyed tonight's show. I certainly did. Thank you so much, JR, for coming on tonight and sharing the information about the Onefinity. I got to give a big shout out to my buddy Ryan. He's always hiding out backstage back there for me, helping me with the comments and stuff. Thank you so much, Ryan. You knocked it out of the park again tonight. And I guess, unless there's any other last second questions, we are going to get out of here. And I don't see any, so we will see everybody next week, same time, Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Come back and see what we got to talk about next week.
Thanks everyone for coming.